What's up, losers, and welcome back to another terrifying episode of Zero Losers Studio, the only channel where I can freely express my queerness through both hunky horror movie killers and now cinema shocking final girls. If you ask anyone who's a huge fan of all things horror cinema, they'll be able to tell you that there are a number of recycled tropes and archetypes littering the genre. Repeated roles played again and again by different characters throughout countless movies. We can talk about the couple that inevitably gets murked while in the middle of a poorly timed, steamy sex scene, or we could talk about the creepy stranger whose sole purpose is to serve as a red herring for the killer throughout the entire movie, only for them to be killed by the true killer close to the end. Or we can talk about my least favorite trope of the black character usually being the first to die in the horror movie. Yeah, I'm glad to see mainstream movies are finally distancing themselves from that one. However, one of the oldest and truest tropes in horror movie history is the role of the final girl character. For those of you that aren't too familiar with the term, let's pull up the Wikipedia definition, shall we? The final girl is a trope in horror films. It refers to the last girl or woman alive to confront the killer, ostensibly the one left to tell the story. This trope is one that's been around for decades in horror cinema, and it's not one that I see being retired anytime soon. I personally can't seem to get enough of this hopeful archetype, and I just can't get enough of seeing badass women fucking it up for their creepy pursuers. And that's why, losers, today's video is all about my top 5 final girls. Starting off at the top of my list is the most controversial pick of my video. That honor goes to Ellen Ripley of 1979's Alien. A lot of you are probably already mad that I'm counting Alien as a horror movie, but it's undeniable that this science fiction movie has its roots deep into the horror genre. Take the space setting away from it and what do you get? A simple movie about a group of people being trapped and picked off one by a mysterious monster. Does that not sound like horror to you? To top it off, Sigourney Weaver did an excellent job as Ellen Ripley. Enough so to get her a nomination for Best Actress at the time. Something completely unseen in both the science fiction and horror genres. Oftentimes, our final girl will seemingly start off as nothing more than an expendable background character until the real action begins and their true colors are revealed. This is the case for Ellen Ripley, which started off as just another crew member until the threat of the xenomorph brought out her ingenuity and fight for survival. This role is often referred to as Sigourney Weaver's best to this day, and the character itself has seen multiple reincarnations to different media like comics and video games. Now, coming up next at number 4 is another horror classic that a lot of us seem to forget about. The number 4 spot goes up to none other than Nancy Thompson of Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. The film came out in 1984 and has had numerous sequels, a lot of which include Nancy. Although still regarded as a pop culture icon of the time, Nancy Thompson is often forgotten behind her more animated and deadlier counterpart, Freddy Krueger. But from the start, it was also clear that Nancy was beginning to change the mold of what was thought as the final girl. Unlike most that came before her, she was more than just the victim. She was smart and resourceful and willing to take the fight to Freddy instead of running and hoping for the best. She's always seen fighting back and she is always prepared for the worst. She literally helps lead a group of peers in a ceremony to destroy Freddy Krueger once and for all in the 3rd installment of the franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street: Dream Warriors. Of course, Nancy isn't stupid though. She's aware of how strong Freddy Krueger is, so she always has a backup plan. Nancy Thompson is definitely deserving of her spot on this list. Enough of Nancy though. Let's move on to number 3. And let me tell you, number 3 is special. This character that we're about to talk about is commonly agreed upon as being the first and original final girl. That's right. This is the blueprint for all final girls that came after, including the 2 spots that are higher above her in this list. Her name is Sally Hardesty, and you need to put some respect on her name. She's a survivor in 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is deserving of a video itself, what with everything it's done for the horror genre in general. But right now, I'm solely talking about Sally. Like I said though, this is the blueprint for most of the final girls that came after, so there's bound to be some differences. For example, unlike the previous 2 contestants for this list, Sally never truly fights back against her killer. She doesn't blow up a ship like Ripley or bring the fight to her oppressors. She just simply endures. She's put through so much trauma and horror and is obviously affected by it. Her little group of friends and family is picked off like flies around a zapper until she's the last one standing. It's only through pure happenstance that she's even able to escape to safety while running away from an angry chainsaw-wielding hillbilly. She lucks out when a pickup driver happens to drive along and help her get away. All in all, she's far from fitting into the heroic mold. But she's not a hero. She's a survivor, she's a blueprint, an original. Sally Hardesty is the original final girl. Okay, so my top 2 spots are usually where I start to sweat over the idea of having to make a decision. And this time isn't any different. I had to think long and hard about who I wanted to put at the very top of my list, and in the end, I went with personal preference. After all, this is my top 5 final girls. First runner-up and number 2 in this week's video is the one and only Laurie Strode. She's the reigning protagonist of the impactful Halloween franchise. The original and undeniably the best portrayal of the character goes to the Scream Queen herself, Jamie Lee Curtis. If you guys have seen one of my previous videos when I rank all the horror movie killers from least to most smashable, yes, it is as ridiculous as it sounds. I have a lot to say about these movies. You also get a pretty good idea of where I stand with Michael Myers in particular. But Laurie Strode is a whole other beast to deal with in the horror genre. Sally Hardesty might be considered by most to be the original final girl, but Laurie Strode is even more commonly seen as the one that brought the trope up into popularity. Just like Sally, Laurie is hunted down by the main antagonist and has everyone around her fall victim to the horrors of her killer. But unlike Sally, she has her own moments of fighting back against the killer that really stuck with us. Bam! Just like that. She's in multiple sequels where she slowly becomes more and more used to being the prey in Michael's twisted game of cat and mouse. But the 2018 reboot is where we truly get to see Laurie's ingenuity and grit in the face of a familiar threat. Seriously, as far as reboots go, this is definitely one of my favorites. I'm very excited for the sequels to it that have already been announced. I think there might be one coming in next year, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But just how much can Laurie take on? She doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Is her luck and skill finally going to run out, or is she destined to fight the unyielding force that is the Shape until her very last breath? Damn, I love these movies. Alright, so clearly I have a lot of love for my girl Laurie. So why isn't she my number 1 pick? Simply put, it's because I have even more love for my next final girl. Again, this is just my preference, but I'm pretty sure that most, if not all of us, can agree that Sidney Prescott is more than deserving of her spot on this list. She's the main protagonist in all 4 of the Scream installments, which makes her Wes Craven's second addition to this video. The original Scream movie came out in 1996, and I've talked a little bit about it before on this channel, but I would love to make a whole video going in depth about the movies themselves later on in the future. Let me know if any of you guys are interested in that, and I will 100% make it happen, please. Anyways, back to Sidney. She's played by the one and only Neve Campbell, and to be honest with you, I grew up having the biggest crush on her that never truly went away. Throughout the first movie and the 3 sequels that have come out in a span of 15 years, we get to see Sidney very slowly and very believably grow up into this confident, strong-willed, and prepared woman. Each movie has its own killer with their own motives, but there's plenty that remains the same for each and every movie. One constant is that the killer always eliminates those closest to Sidney, one by one, until she's left alone for her final battle against the newest reincarnation of Ghostface. In the first and second movie, Sidney is understandably scared shitless of the killers after her, and in the third one, that fear actually plays a huge part driving the plot forward. She barely leaves her house, she lives in the middle of nowhere where no one can find her, she has alarms set up all over her house, the works. But by the end of the movie and throughout the entire fourth movie, Sidney is a completely different character. She's finally hardened from her experiences and is ready for another quote-unquote random spree of kills as she can be. She makes the transition of running from the killer to running to the killer. This girl ain't playing no more. She knows for a fact that if it's either her or them standing last, it's definitely gonna be her. And that, losers, is why Sidney Prescott is my number 1 final girl. And the crush, but that's not important. So, There you have it, losers. Ito strikes again with his love of horror. Truly, this is one of my favorite videos that I've made so far, just because I love these movies so much, and I have so much to say about them and the characters that make them up. Horror can usually be overplayed out and predictable, something that the genre has struggled with a lot over the past years. But when done just right, it's the source of masterpieces. From originals to sequels to reboots, the one thing that I ask of horror is to keep me on my toes and help me form a connection. These final girls that I talked about today are a huge reason how those movies were able to do that. We owe a lot to these fictional women, and I hope to see a lot more of them show up on the big screen as time passes. But anyways, enough conclusion. This is officially the end of the video, so do what you gotta do. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, share, blah blah blah. And don't forget, what's your favorite final girl? And please tell me why. I will be checking the comments. Until next time though, you guys already know. I'll see you later, losers.